Hello guys, in today's video we are going to be taking a look at game between Hikaru Nakamura as white and Fabiano Caruana as black into American Cup 2025. This was the final of the American Cup, and so let's see what happened. So the game started with d4 by Hikaru, we got d5 by Fabiano, and now we got c4, typical Queen's Gambit. Of course, if black accepts it, is going to be accepted Queen's Gambit. If he declines, let's say e6, it's going to be normal Queen's Gambit. Now we got e6, and here Nakamura decides to play the move knight f3. We got knight f6, and now we got typical Catalan defense by typical specific move g3 by white. The idea is very simple. He's looking forward to bring the bishop on g2. That bishop is going to be a long-term piece, and white is pretty much standing very well. After move g3, we got d takes c4. Another option by black can be potentially bishop b4. While after bishop d2, bishop e7 back, the idea is to place this bishop so the knight can't quickly come on d2. White can play something like queen c2, and the game can go on from that point. However, we got d takes c4, and now we got the move bishop g2. White is looking forward again to play for the long-term bishop from g2, trying to make diagonals very clearly in his path, and looking forward to cause the problems for the black's queen side. In this game, Caruana decided to play a6. He was once playing knight e6 against Hikaru, where after queen a4, the game again is going on. White is looking forward to capture on c4 quickly. However, in this one, he decided to go for the move a6. The idea is very simple. He's looking forward to play b5, connect the pawn structure, and make sure that his position is very solid. We got castles, and here we got the move knight c6. The idea is very simple, viewing this pawn and generally putting the pressure on it, developing the knight. So now we got knight b2 by Hikaru. At first look, this move seems like it's hanging a pawn, but what is the thing about over here? After going knight d4, the thing over here is that actually white doesn't have a huge problem. Why? Basically, even though it seems like black is actually up at least a clear pawn, because the pawn on c4 is hanging, after knight takes, bishop takes, and let's say queen d1, rook d1, white is actually having great activity and great development, while black is overall generally having an issue with the bishop on c8, bishop on f8, and he's quite struggling to figure out what is he going to do. So this is the main issue of the position, and most likely this is the reason why Fabiano is not going through this position. Also, it's worth mentioning that black is generally having a trouble to develop and create an activity. So those players are usually deciding to play more active than actually playing to be like passive and without too many chances, even if they are up material. So in the Catalan, it's actually very common to get the positions where you sacrifice the pawn as white and you try to play for activity, especially if we talk from g2 a diagonal where this bishop is standing. So in the game, Caruana decided to play b5, which is the best move, guarding the pawn and also allowing the bishop to come to b7. b3 by white. Actually, the idea is very simple. He's looking forward to also create potential for bishop b2, but not only this, the whole point is to actually after take, so white can take with the knight. And in this case, white is going to have a lot of the space around the c file, a lot of the gameplay here, and a lot of the possibilities. So black needs to be careful about what is he going to do. Caruana decided to play the move c3, attacking the knight, making sure that the pressure is here, and now we got the move knight b1. Knight b1, simply attacking the pawn, forcing black to do b4, the only move to really defend the pawn. And for the moment, it seems like those pawns are very dangerous, and white's queen side is again pretty closed. But that's not actually the case. They a little bit overstayed, so Nakamura find a great resource, the move a3. Let's say black does a5. That would be not so good for black, because after ab and let's say knight b4, this pawn is simply falling. White is not not down a pawn anymore, and also white has a lot of the activity. Black has a pawn structure which is not so great, and generally white's position just seems very, very playable for more than just a draw. If AB, obviously AB is a blunder because of the rook takes rook. So Caruana realizes that, and he does the move bishop b7. Nakamura still in his preparation. As we can see, he went for knight e5, and now we got the move c2. Another option in this case was to play something like knight e5, where the game would be quite complicated here, because after AB and let's say bishop b4, Nakamura is probably looking for something like bishop a3, trade the dark square bishops, try to cause the long-term weaknesses for the black dark squares, and try to play around the squares. So basically in this case we got the move c2 by Caruana. He didn't went for d5. He spent quite good amount of time here, 11 minutes. So after c2, Nakamura is now in situation where he must play bishop c6. Why? Let's say he goes queen c2. It's simply not good because of the tempo move knight d4. The knight attacks the queen. The queen is no longer having like some tempo moves, so white is not available to capture the bishop on b7. Let's say bishop queen c4, bishop g2, king g2, and now after the queen trades, after knight d5, black simply seems very, very stable. So in this case, it's practically available bishop c6. That's what happened, and now we got bishop takes, must move, and now we got queen c2. Now white is attacking the bishop. What kind of change in the position is that the bishop pair for the white is gone. The bishop from g2 is gone, and yeah, that's a very powerful bishop. But in Catalan eventually exist those types of positions where it's actually pretty much possible to give the light square bishop like this and to play without him. Even though it looks very scary, we will see how Nakamura handled these positions and eventually won the game. So after queen c2, we got the move bishop e4, and now queen b2 by white. So let's say he went queen d2. That would actually be quite suspicious, because simply both knight and the bishop are outside of the range to develop, and this is not really easy for white. Instead, over here we got the move queen b2 by white. Nakamura is keeping the queen here, so the bishop and the knight can get outside, also making sure that this pawn is developed. Now we got bishop b7. Black is simply preparing queen d5, looking forward to reach g2 eventual checkmate, and can cause serious problems for white. Now we got pawn takes, bishop takes, and now finally we got the move bishop d2. After doing bishop d2, now Caruana decided to play c5 to solve the problem of the c pawn, and eventually just try to make the position work out normally. Now we got knight d3, going back, attacking c5, attacking b4, and finally we got the move queen d5. After doing queen d5, black is threatening either queen g2 or queen h1, where the things for white will be not so easy. So Nakamura has to play the move f3. Let's say he captures and he blunders checkmate, because either there's queen h1 or either there's queen g2. So two checkmates here, and yeah, so he has to play f3. In this case, he played it instantly, and after f3 we got bishop d2, knight takes, of course taking with the knight to develop as well, and now after knight takes we got queen d4 check. There was also the possibility of c takes d4, but that would lead to very nasty idea queen a3, where white would actually stop black from castling, cause problems around that king protection, and literally black would need to answer, you know, on a lot of the questions over here. So that's why he decided to go queen d4. We got queen takes, and now c takes d4. At this position, as we can see, black is simply up a pawn, and black is having pretty great overall situation. When it comes of his king, he will be fine, but that pawn is not like a clear pawn, because white has a lot of the activity and the possibilities with his knights are pretty big. Also, white has the ideas as rook c1, rook a4, and what happened in the game is actually the move rook c1. Nakamura is making sure to open up the file, and it's worth mentioning that at this point Nakamura has a 50 minutes on the clock while Caruana has a 23 minutes on the clock, and basically also Nakamura is having 27 minutes more than his opponent, while it's also very important to note that from the first there's only 90 minutes plus 30 seconds, and after 40 moves there are no additional half an hour. So after this case we got castles, and here we got the move rook a4. The idea is very simple: attack the pawn on d4, prepare double stack of the rook on a file, and eventually put the pressure on the a6 pawn. Now we got rook d8, and here we got rook c7. So Nakamura is using the ability to put the rook on the 7th rank, making sure to attack both b7, and also rook on c7 is doing perfect. Now we got rook d7, white goes rook d7, and here we got knight d7. Now we got rook d4 by white, here we got bishop c6, and now white goes knight c4. So white is making sure to bring all of his pieces to the game, to be quite active, and after that we got the move a5. So little inaccuracy by Caruana. What was basically very strong here and powerful to probably keep the things good for black is to play the move like bishop b5, and here with bishop b5 black is making sure to have a great bishop protected by the pawn. Black has always the ability to trade the bishop for the knight, and probably with the similar pawn structure on the king side, and the same pawn structure on the king side, and the similar a and b pawns on the queen side, the game would likely end in a draw. But after the move a5, what pretty much seems like this pawn might be a target, because he is now on the dark square, which is completely opposite color from the bishop on c6. Now we got the move king f2, Nakamura brings the king, and here we got king f8, when after that white goes for rook d6, attacking the rook and putting the pressure. Black has to play bishop b5, and here we got move knight e3. The threat is of course taking the bishop. Let's say he would go rook b8, that would be a blunder, because simply takes and takes a free knight, so white would be completely winning. So Caruana instantly takes on d3, and here we got the move rook d7. If white was going to play this move, black can simply move the king up, prepare knight c5, and pretty much black should be completely okay. However, we got the move rook d7 by Nakamura. He's making sure to cause imbalance, to keep the disbalance in the position, because the knight against the bishop can actually very often lead to some trouble. And now we got bishop a6, we got rook d6, and here we got king e7. The mistake by Caruana, he quickly played that. The better move was king e8, simply the point is that, let's say rook c6, there's bishop b7. If there's king e7, let's say rook c6, bishop b7 simply leads to the blunder, do it to rook c7, and white is just completely winning the game. So that's why king e7 was slight mistake. Now we got rook c6, and this rook is basically cut off of the moving, because the bishop on a6 has to be defended. I mean, his only move is here, but that wouldn't really help black. And after king f6, we got the move rook c5 by Nakamura. Nakamura is making sure to attack a5, to put the pressure, to not allow black a lot of the maneuvering, and now we got the move bishop b7. Black is going back on useful diagonal, making sure to protect this pawn, and eventually preparing the move bishop d5, because what is the plan for black in this position? The plan for black in this position is to simply try to change the a pawn for the b pawn. In this case, that would give him a slightly easier approach to the position and possibilities to make a draw. However, until the queen side is with the pawns over here, white has a great chances to try to play for more. So now we got e4 by Nakamura. He eventually missed knight c4. He saw that, but probably he thought after bishop d5, rook a5, rook b8, and let's say rook a3, black can enter this endgame, which is quite active for black rook. And eventually speaking, if white is not available to calculate something concrete, it's not so easy to see how is white going to win the game due to the black's activity. And one of the key rules that we know in the endgame is activate your pieces, try to make sure that they are active and not and they can play for more. So Nakamura most likely thought that e4 is simply stopping bishop d5, and it's a very practical choice. And now we got the move a4. After 3 minutes of thinking, Caruana left to almost 4 minutes, and with such a little time on the clock, the position might get tricky. Now we got b4, of course not b takes, because after rook takes this is a draw, and after b4 black does the move rook d8. Nakamura decided to play king e2, going and defending idea of rook d1. Now we got g5, and here we got rook c4. Very nice move. White is looking forward to play b5, and as soon as he does b5, it's not so clear how is black going to defend the pawn on a4. So now after b5 we got h5, and now we got the move b5. So now after b5 black goes g4, we got f4, and now after that we got e5. Caruana decides to strike around the center to create some disbalance in the position, because what is so clear over here is that this pawn is kind of hanging and he's going to fall. I mean, obviously the idea of like rook a8 is quite passive, and after king e3 white seems to be very, very active here, so that's why most likely Caruana doesn't want to enter that, but instead he goes for something more concrete. We got e5, and here Nakamura makes a mistake. Instead over here, instead of f5, the best option was to take, and after takes, go king e3, when white has a simple possibility to play rook c5, to play rook c7. His king is quite active, and black's pawns might start falling with each other. So the problems in these positions are pretty much visible. However, Nakamura thought that after f5, this also should be winning, but he missed the move rook c8 here. And the move rook c8 is only real drawish chance, because let's say rook c8, bishop c8, this is simply drawish. And after, let's say, rook takes a4, there's a brilliant move rook c3, which is completely stopping white's activity and causing problems for the white's position, where black is pretty much standing correct. In this case, when white played f5, Caruana had only 2 minutes on the clock, and he couldn't find the move rook c8. Instead, he went for the idea of h4. When after rook takes, pawn takes, he went rook h8 with initial idea to bring the rook on the h file through the on the second rank or the third rank through the h file, putting the pressure on g3 and putting the pressure around the king. In this case, we got the move knight b1, we got rook h2, and here we got the move king d1. When black does rook h1, and after king c2 by Hikaru, we got the move rook e1, which is apparently a blunder. What he should have went for is simply the move rook g1, and let's say now knight d2, he is basically gonna play rook g2, and after playing rook g2, white is simply having not so easy time finding out the possibilities. Let's say white go for something like rook a3, there's simply bishop e4, and it seems like black is going to survive the game at least. So that was the only chance for Caruana, but because of the time problem, he probably couldn't find all of these possibilities, and now after rook e1 the game is permanently over. Why? Because after knight c3 and the rook e3, which was his only idea to create something, white has a beautiful knight d5, and Nakamura finds it. He finds that key moment in the game. What is the thing? After knight d5, bishop d5 is necessarily because the rook was hanging with a check. After ed and let's say rook g3, what happened? Now white has a move b6. So what is the point here? The point here is that b7 and rook b4 are coming. The game is currently over. In this moment, Fabiano Caruana resigned, so we got Hikaru Nakamura, who is leading 1-0 in the American Cup Finals. Over here, why this is resignation? Let's say rook g1, b7, it's completely promotion. Let's say rook g2, there's king c3, and after rook g3, there's king c4. After rook g1, there's simply b7, and after rook b1, there's simply rook b4. White is completely winning the game, and at this point, there's nothing else that he can do. Let's say rook b4, takes, b8, this, there's simply something like queen b6 check, and after takes, queen f2 check, when the black pawn is falling, and white is just completely winning the game. So, that would be it for today's video. Please leave a subscribe if you like our content and the game analysis. Also, you can suggest me what you would like to see the next, and thank you so much for support. Bye!